At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
This episode is brought to you by Prime Video. In the small town of Holland, Michigan, nothing is ever what it seems. Behind the tulip festivals and pretty houses lay dark secrets that threaten to tear a marriage apart. Nicole Kidman stars in this darkly twisted thriller about a wife and mother whose quest to uncover her husband's secrets may get her more than she bargained for. Holland, streaming on Prime Video March 27th.
Welcome to the Parent Footprint Podcast with Dr. Dan. I'm Dr. Dan, your host. Our goal and mission at Parent Footprint, as you all know, is to create a loving world with more compassionate people, one parent and one child at a time. And here's how we do this. We encourage all parents, all people, to be fully invested in their own lives, because if we parents are happy, engaged, aware, we can raise kids with those same ideals, and we can show our kids how to be the people we want them to become by modeling it ourselves. We believe entirely that awareness is the foundation of creating a vision of successful parenting, and being aware of what we want for our kids. We can be purposeful, parent with purpose, and do this day in and day out to leave a legacy of love and compassion for our kids and our future generations. This show is about talking with amazing people who are fully living their life to model for their own children how to be and follow their own passion and dreams. And I can't think of a better guest to talk with today than Mary Carlomagno. Mary is an amazing person. She's the owner of Order, which specializes in clutter control, urban apartment solutions, office spaces, and shopping addiction. And her philosophy is simple: do not let clutter control your life. She has been on TV a lot. She's been on the Oprah Winfrey Show, which we're going to talk about. It was a great segment. The Today Show, Fox and Friends, Dayside, The God Squad, CBS News, and Good Housekeeping TV. She's been interviewed by NPR, the Joan Hamburg Show, Martha Stewart, and Lisa Gibbons, and her approach is featured in tons of publications: Real Simple, Women's Day, Quick and Simple for Me, Newsday, and Daily News. And she writes all the time for other amazing publications like Washington Post, the Philadelphia Inquirer, Pink Women's World, Body and Soul, and Figure. Her first book, Give It Up, My Year of Learning to Live Better and Less, was an amazing bestseller. She also wrote Secrets of Simplicity, and her third book, Live More, Want Less, is published by Story Publishing. And her first novel, Best Friend for Hire, will be published in June. And we're going to talk about that today, too. So today's show is called Secrets of Simplicity and Living Better. Mary, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Dan.
So, Mary, as I was learning about you and reading your stuff, of course, I go straight to your Oprah segment, and I was just drawn in by your story, which I'm sure you have told many, many, many times. And I just think this is a great way to dive in, to let our listeners know. Tell us about your transformation, that transformational year, and how you got to this journey.
Well, believe it or not, I haven't told the story that much, mainly because at the time that I was being interviewed or asked to be on the Oprah show, I had just had my first son. So I was a new mom, and he was about 5 months old, and I was nursing and stressed out and couldn't possibly believe that they sent me home from the hospital with this child and no manual to figure out how to take care of this little 7-pound person. So at the time when Harpo Productions had called to have me on the program, I didn't even pick up the phone because I was holding my son, and I was just, riddled with stress. How am I going to take care of my baby? And my husband said, "Pick up the phone. Oprah is calling." And I said, "Wow, I'm more scared of my baby than I am of Oprah." So I hesitated a little bit.
That puts things in
before I
perspective,
finally
right? Yeah.
Yeah, it really does. Parenthood, as you well know, you've talked to many people about this experience, is really an awe-producing, angst-producing, and stress-producing time for new parents. So at the time, I think it was a good thing because I really thought about going on the Oprah show after having a 5-month-old child and knowing that her audience was millions and millions of people, I probably would have focused a bit too much on it. So I had a healthy parenthood distraction there. Oprah came along at a time when I had written my second book, which was Secrets of Simplicity, which is a journal on how to each person can individualize their journey of living with less, and it goes back to talk about many of the civilizations and ancient religions that really embrace the simplicity movement, all the way up to Henry David Thoreau, who went to the woods to find a simpler life. I, like Thoreau, would go to the woods, but I would usually go to a large designer outlet mall. So we were similar in some ways at that time. That overconsumption and shopping addiction, which I was falling victim to, had led me to start writing and start the company to begin with. So the first book, Give It Up, was a lesson in how to give up something mindfully each month, like the Catholics will give up something during Lent, to become more aware of your surroundings and have a general appreciation of life. So that's really where my journey began with that book.
Well, and you described how you did this month by month. And as I was listening, I'm thinking, wow, I mean, this is tremendous willpower. But I think if you can tell us, it goes actually much deeper than willpower. It almost becomes a way of being, a commitment to oneself.
Yes, I had read that it takes 4 weeks to make or break a habit. And I found, and this relates to everything I do. It relates to the fiction writing. It relates to writing in general. It relates to organizing and habit forming, that in that 4-week period, you start to create a rictualistic behavior. So think of Michael Phelps. I always think of Michael Phelps swimming. Right. I saw him recently interviewed. I think he said he used to swim 4 to 6 hours each day. So he's at the Olympics for that reason. He's a ritualistic practitioner. And like anything else, like you exercise, like you walk your dog or brush your teeth or do anything in a ritualistic behavior, it takes root and becomes a habit. So I wanted to take for a month things that were important to me. Now, I was living a very privileged life. I'm not exactly underprivileged in this world, but I did not have a sense of appreciation for the things I had in life. And, with all of that wealth and shopping and running around New York City and having a great time came no great happiness. And to me, that was the part that was a little distressing. And I had grown up, in New Jersey, very, middle-class, suburban. We didn't really want for anything. We weren't overly excessive, but I think when I did get into my single life and living in the city, I started really over-shopping and really being a lot more materialistic than I could have, should have been, let's say should. So I wanted to put things in balance, and that's where it came from. I don't applaud me too much. I gave up February 28-day month to give up shopping.
There you go.
So.
You got to start somewhere, right?
I got to start somewhere, exactly.
But you did it, and didn't the momentum build? I mean, because the inspiration here is one can make a commitment to better oneself and take action day by day and get results over time, right? So did the momentum build?
Oh, absolutely. But what the shift was were these subtle shifts. People would say, oh, so, you went in and changed your closet and it changed your life. Well, it did, because the idea was to change. I didn't know how to change. I was sitting stuck in the same apartment, same job, serial dating throughout Manhattan, didn't have a good relationship, and it was just a cyclical thing that just kept going because I just settled for what was there. I didn't try and change anything. I was very fearful of change. So as I began to do these little subtle changes, giving up multitasking or cell phones, or one month I gave up elevators and started walking and, to try and become more active. I gave up coffee. I'm coincidentally, I am off coffee again. But that was probably the hardest thing. I don't recommend that one. Do anything else but that one. But what I learned in that year was how to change, how to do something differently, look at something differently. And after that year, that very next January, I left my corporate job. I started writing the first book about the experience, which wasn't the intent. The intent was to have the experience, not to write about it. And then I started Order, my consulting company, because I found other people were looking to do the same types of things. And I also moved out of my apartment, met my husband, and we got engaged that next year. So I got pretty comfortable with change.
Yeah, that was a good year. That was a big year.
That was a good year.
So our listeners are thinking, okay, so how do I change? Because, most of us parents are really busy. And as you said, I think stress and overwhelm come with the job. We just don't truly realize it until we're in it. And we want to be better parents. We want to be better people. We want to change these habits. What do you tell your clients? How do you go about change?
The key to it is to start. Don't wait for some perfect condition to start. It doesn't have to be, a sunny day in June. Start now and start with something small. I talk to a lot of parents in my own community here, and the biggest thing I tell them is you can say no, thank you. You don't always have to say yes, because, clutter comes in your shoe closet, it comes in your spice rack, but it also comes in your schedule. And I think that that's the problem that most parents that I talk to in my community are having now, is that we're so overscheduled and everything seems to be at equal proportion. I always use this analogy. When you go to the Holland Tunnel and you're getting into the city, there are 4 cars going in at the same time. They all have competing priorities. You have to take one at a time. And I think our inclination, especially with parenting-related events, is that this is for my child and I have to do it now. And I encourage people to say, you can have it all. You just can't have it all on Tuesday. You really need to think about what are the right things to do, the necessary things to do now, and happily send the others away. No, thank you. And people think it has to be a personal indictment. I can't do that, and it has to be, met with some sort of, hostility that you're turning something away. But you can simply flex your no thank you muscles and say, this would be a great thing that I can do. I just can't take it on right now. And I always say, somebody had asked me to, people ask me to organize things all the time, obviously. They asked me to do a fundraiser, and they said, you would be great at that. I said, I certainly would be great at that, but I can't do it at this time because I like to do things fully. And if I can't devote myself to it fully, then I cannot do it. So no, thank you. And I think that's a really healthy way to limit how much you take on in your schedule and how much you take on for your children as well. So it's a balance for both, the individual and the family.
Well, what you just said, which I really like and is totally aligned with Parent Footprint, is when we're aware of what our goals are and what our vision is for how we want life to be now and in the future, we make decisions in the present based on those goals. So if we're not being mindful, we're just saying yes, 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 or just going through all of the, again, rigmarole of one thing to another with our lives and parenting. But if we're trying to have a more balanced life, and if we have this goal of really thinking about a decision before we make it, it sounds like we're saying the same things. Like, we can make choices that are in line with what our vision is.
Absolutely. I mean, there's such a huge correlation between the organizing world and the parenting world, because What we do in organizing and releasing clutter is releasing the emotion or the anxiety you feel about the task rather than doing the task itself. What we try to do is manage, well, if I don't volunteer for this, how will they feel about me, and what will that look like, and does it look like I don't care? But in actuality, to commit to something that you're not fully vested in is worse than saying, no, thank you, I can't do this right now. And then, what you start to do is you build this cycle of shoulding on yourself. I should do this, I should do that. And that happens with organizing a lot. I mean, people are so stressed out about their clutter when really the clutter is not the problem. It's how we feel about it.
Yes, and I love that you just brought in good old Dr. Albert Ellis with his shoulding on oneself, right, for everyone. So that was just, Mary said a great thing. I just want to explain that he started rational emotive behavioral therapy, and it's all like the beginning of cognitive therapy. And one of the two things that he talked about, which you will never forget, is one should never should on themselves or masturbate. And he thought the two words of must and should were the most debilitating words that made us feel awful. And you know what? So we shouldn't should on ourselves, right? That's what we're saying here. Okay. That's
exactly right. And I think that we all do that a lot. I mean, there's certain things that obviously are beneficial for us to do, but I think the competing priorities notion has just gotten away from us, and certainly the social media world doesn't help either, because I think we're often spending time talking about the things that we're doing rather than actually being in the moment and doing them. So, this weekend I was at a yoga retreat with a couple of moms, which was one of the first times I've ever been away for more than one night from my children, because it doesn't occur to me to leave my family too often.
Yeah.
I actually left New Jersey, too, so that was a big step for me.
Big.
Yeah, but, we spent the whole weekend not really using social media, and then towards the end, someone said, well, should we take a picture and post it to social media? And I said, well, we have to, because if we don't do that, then this really did not take place. This didn't happen unless we put it on social media. So it's really interesting the way that our minds work now, too, to maybe not go through the critical thinking of, accepting obligations, rejecting obligations, but also reporting on these obligations, and maybe accepting some of these obligations for the wrong reasons, which I think can happen a lot too.
Right. Well, and better than anyone how our society is obsessed with stuff, and we have devices attached to us which have scientifically figured out how to change our neurotransmitter serotonin and dopamine levels to push buttons and to buy stuff. I mean, so I think we're at an all-time, this is probably the most difficult time to resist all of this stuff. How do you recommend people focus on the quality of family time, putting devices and stuff away to focus on what's important in their lives?
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Upgrade your business with Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning fewer carts going abandoned and more sales going cha-ching. So if you're into growing your business, get a commerce platform that's ready to sell wherever your customers are. Visit Shopify.com to upgrade your selling today.
Holiday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Holiday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner by knockout is Holiday. Holiday, bring it on.
Hey y'all, it's Caitlin and Kane Brown here with Wayfair. As a growing family, one of our favorite things is Game Night Wayfair Edition.
Let's do it. You got to name as many Wayfair furniture and decor categories as you can. Ready? Go.
Sofas, bar stools, beds, ottomans, outdoor seating, bookshelves, kitchen tables, garden sheds, mid-century modern lamps.
Time. Nice. You got 9 out of a lot. Not too bad. Keep practicing by visiting Wayfair.com, where you can shop every style for every home.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Yeah, I mean, it's the lesson of the fidget spinner. The fidget spinner is this, out of nowhere, Malcolm Gladwell writes about the tipping point, how suddenly The fidget spinner was in front of us, and my kids who are in first and second grade, we need one. We have to have one. And we, this is going to sound a little cruel, but we work on purposefully disappointing our children to set their expectations.
I like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's one of my goals with my children, because I feel that my son definitely has my shopping gene, my daughter not so much. So, which is interesting. So I'm always, talking them through, well, what is the purpose of this thing? You can't bring it to school, and what's it for, and what was it designed for? And I just found it really interesting how things bubble up. And like you say, we're trained to then say, we have to have this. So I work against that with clients in a couple of ways. One is I encourage people to love things that love them back. In other words, if you're telling me you love your Coach bag, I would argue with you that that is not love, because in love there's reciprocity, we hope. So that's one way of not assigning these deeply felt emotions towards possessions. And also the idea of living in experiences rather than possessions. So... and I find that with gift giving, too. Like, I'd rather take a friend out for a coffee or a meal than buy them another piece of jewelry. So living in experiences that are much more fulfilling than just in an object. So those are two lessons I work with clients, and certainly with my children. I think my children would rather have me go outside and play ball with them than sit and do, an iPad game or, the fidget spinner or whatever it is. I feel like the children, and I still see it, I still see it with my kids. After school, if one child brings a ball after school, they all are entertained for an hour. They really do want to live an experience. I think it is an inclination to live an experience. I do. Because it's fulfilling.
Yeah, I love those two guiding principles. So I'm going to reiterate them. One is... true relationships involve emotional reciprocity. You get something back from that other being. And secondly, focusing on experience versus things. I mean, it seems like with those two things in mind, it's much easier to make decisions about what to get, what to say no to, and what to do. I really like that.
Absolutely. I mean, we try to, it's really funny, just my husband and I, we try to think about our lifestyle and our family style as we had it. And we're both older parents. So I'm 49 years old, and I have an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old. So we started at this game pretty late. So I think that sometimes, you can look at that in a couple of ways. Sometimes I feel, oh gosh, it would be great to have that 32-year-old body again. And then I have to think, well, but I wouldn't have my 49-year-old mind and the experience and wisdom and patience that comes as you're older. Because I think as a 32-year-old, I don't know that I would have been as well equipped to be as patient with my children as I am now. And, my lesson is always that we like to model our behavior to how we want them to be, and we really think of our own childhood, and that's a little while ago now. There wasn't as much distraction, so we're always trying to block out some of those other stimuli that the modern world is throwing at us. So we go to the library. Certainly that was the most important thing I ever did in my life. My mother took me to the library to get Judy Blume books every Saturday, and I'd read them all.
I remember those. Mm-hmm.
And then I'd get Laura Ingalls Wilder, and I'd read them all, and I'd go back. And, it was an internal and private experience as a child, but it just opened up the world to me, and that's something that we do now with our children. And I just think that those ways of connection, it connects me with my past, and it connects my children to what I did, because then they ask the question, well, what kind of books did you get? And it opens up this whole new world for them as well.
Well, and our kids are always watching. Even when they're not watching, they're absorbing our energy. And if our energy is burnt out or negative or anxious or depressed, that impacts them. A lot of parents, we feel like, oh, no, we're keeping that from them. And unfortunately, we're not, because we can't. And so this whole idea of being fully engaged in life, in our own lives, has just incredible positive kickback and rewards for our kids, both from an energetic level, but also seeing us pursue our dreams. And not only did you want to, stumbled into writing, but really have always loved books and writing. This latest venture for you is really, your first novel. Tell us how that really is about stepping in to following your passion.
Well, I was afraid of it for so long. I wrote it after I wrote my first book, and then I put it in a drawer and got really frightened. And it was so scary that I, got married and had 2 kids to avoid it. I'm kidding. It was that scary. So I left it for a while, and it wasn't until I had a client about 4 years ago who had seen me do a talk on clutter. She had contacted me. I think she had seen me something like 8 years ago, and it took her 4 years to contact me. When I finally went to her home, she was also a writer, and the job she wanted me to do was file all of these short stories and novels she had written that she had never published. And I came home and I said to my husband, told him about the experience, and he said, "You don't want to be that woman who has a novel in her drawer that you never published it. You should work on this." So I pulled it out, and I took another 2 years and hired someone to coach me through it and keep me on plan, which is always good. As you hire an organizer, you can hire a life coach or a writing coach or whatever you need. Sometimes it's okay not to do it alone, and that was true of me. I needed some accountability, and I did that for a summer, and then I'm publishing it this year. So it was a leap of faith. It was a leap into the unknown. But I go by the philosophy of leap and the net will appear. And it has. So I think that there's something in that leap that gives you the confidence to then move forward.
Hear that, everyone? Leap and the net will appear. That just brought me back to Indiana Jones when he had to take a step into that chasm, and then the road appeared. So yes. I love that. Leap and the net will appear. And the other thing that you have said is that even though this is your first novel, this is almost your most, did you say truthful book? How would you describe it?
It's funny because it's written in a first-person narrative format, and it explores many of the themes that I, as an adult, have been exploring. So it takes a walk through book publishing. It takes a walk through the self-help industry. There's a little bit of client work in there. So it does draw on many of the experiences and people that I've met. And it takes place in New Jersey, and the woman is part of a large Italian family that can be extraordinarily helpful. So it is very reflective of many of the experiences that I have had. In a way, it's much more truthful. In the nonfiction works, I'm often conveying other people's stories. The first book was a first-person narrative, but in the second books that followed, I was talking about other people's stories and ancient wisdom. So it feels good to come back to my truth a little bit, to write a little bit of, what you know. So I write what I know, and initially that was shopping, and now it's this kind of exploration into a woman's journey of finding herself.
And your kids are watching you live it and do it. You're right. You're role modeling that for them.
And they're writing themselves too. There's such a great focus on writing for children now, which is great. And I was really just, my heart swelled because when my kids first started going to school, they told the teacher that I was an author. And I think at that point I wasn't really talking to them too much about it, but at 4 and 5 and, of course 6, they're much more aware, but in kindergarten they were telling their teachers that I was an author. And I don't remember really talking to them so much about it. I just remember doing it. I would be writing an article and they would know what I was doing. And
they're always watching. They know. They're
listening, and they listen.
And they're listening.
They're like little sponges.
Well, and this is a good segue then to our parent footprint moment, where it is now your turn, Mary, to tell everyone about your parent footprint moment where you became aware of something about yourself as an individual or as a parent, and that new awareness had a positive impact on your kids?
Well, I think the entire idea of writing and going to the library has been the most universal lesson I've had with them. And I did have that awareness when I was invited to come into the classroom to read as a mystery reader. And the teacher, who I hadn't talked to her about this at all, she had known that I was a writer, and she asked me to bring in my own books to show the kids. And it was just really a great way of me seeing my son in a much different way, too, of him in the classroom. And he was so happy and so proud that I was there and that I was able to show a book. And the kids were really just so interested in meeting someone who had actually written a book. So for me, that was just such a wonderful moment, because I think throughout like the first few years of your child's life, you look at them, and then that was the first moment where I saw my son looking at me. So it was really interesting. And then, you know, your relationship then evolves from there, because I think that as you have an identity as a parent, you don't think you really have an identity in those early years because you're so focused on them. And then suddenly it switches. And I think that's the phase I'm in now, where what I do, what I say, how I act is much more important than ever.
Absolutely. It all matters. I mean, it all matters. I mean, the way that they see us ponder, the way that they see us react, the way that they see us take a breath before reacting, it all matters. So thank you for sharing that moment. And Mary, thank you for sharing everything. I mean, your path is inspirational. And what I love is you're out there just modeling for everyone that everyone can do this, right? Everyone can take steps in their life to make the changes they want. And from what you said, we just have to start one step at a time. That's it, people. Mary, tell everyone where they can find all of your stuff, your new book, Best Friends for Hire, that's coming out. Where should they track you and find you?
Well, that book comes out on June 20th. You can follow me on Facebook at Mary Carlomagno Author. I also have marycarlomagno.com, and Twitter handle is Mary Carlomagno. So it's really all my name.
So put in her name, and you will find her. You will find her. Mary, thanks so much. I am going to take my own steps. You have inspired me. Everyone, thank you for listening to the Parent Footprint Podcast with Dr. Dan. Check us out at www.parentfootprint.com. Remember, you can be the person you want your kids to become. You can live with purpose and presence and parent with purpose. And I'll leave you with the guiding question I always do. What footprint do you want to leave?